Good afternoon, everybody. Those that are in the concession, thank you for coming. Welcome to the Maison Design+Build main stage or speaker stage. My name is Stephen Simon, and I am your host for the weekend. Our next presenter has 23 years of experience in this industry. So from commercial to industrial to residential construction, he knows what he's talking about. So I hope you have a great listening session here with Andrew Wagner. So let's welcome to the stage, Andrew Wagner.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out to talk about planning and designing a dream home here. We're going to walk you guys through some of the bigger steps involved in that, and we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. So if you want to put your hand up just to flag me down during the presentation, I can definitely answer them. And at the end, too, we'll have a little bit of time to do that. So we're going to focus on 5 different questions, and the first one is, how do we get started? It can be very overwhelming when you're planning a dream home, or any home for that matter, and so what we're trying to do is demystify that a little bit just to give you some of the examples of things to ask. The next big step is, what do you need to know to hire a builder? Are you going to open up the yellow pages, or are you going to go on Google and do a search? That can also be very overwhelming to know who and how, and then also what questions to ask them when you do end up phoning them. Number 3, what should I look for in a design team? So one of the key things about custom homes is they require extensive design and planning, and you want to know, who do I need to bring in for professionals in order to help me with that, with those tasks. The next, number 4, is, how do I get my team to work together? One of the things, when you get multiple people involved, you want to make sure that they actually connect and can get your objectives met. And then, of course, at the end, we're just talking about how it all kind of comes together for all the different the areas there. So the first thing to talk about, or the 4 things that we're going to talk about before starting a dream home, that you're going to want to spend some time talking to your family, your partner, your significant other, is, what kind of budget are we prepared to invest in a house? So what you don't want to do is show up calling your builder and not actually have a number in mind, because that's going to be the first thing that they're going to ask you is, well, how much do you want to spend on this dream home? The next thing is where you want to go. There's many different, pros and cons about different areas in the city. Whether you're on an acreage or actually within the city. And so it's important that you kind of know where you want to locate. When, so that kind of comes down to the timing. If you're in a really big rush and you need a house right now, you probably do not want to build a custom home. And the reason for that is that if you make a custom home go fast, usually you're going to get something that isn't and doesn't match what you're actually looking for. And that's not good, because you don't want to spend money on something that you're not actually excited or happy about. The next thing is what type of home are you building? So how big is it? That sort of thing. So we're going to walk through each one of those questions. So talking about budget first, this is a real important step. First thing you want to do is you actually want to go to the bank and find out just exactly how much money you qualify for a mortgage. And that's going to be based on your income and your assets. They're also going to take a look at how much cash on hand you have. And when you add those 2 things together, that's going to be your total available number for a project. So when you go to work with your home builder and when you go to work with your designers, you're going to want them to know that number, because everyone has to work backwards from it so that you don't go over it. And that's a real important thing. A lot of people end up exceeding their number, and then well, that's not good if you don't have the money to pay for it. The other thing, too, to remember is, do you have to actually sell your home? One of the things a lot of people forget is that they may have a lot of equity tied up in their house, but that equity might be actually required for the project and for them to qualify. So you want to make sure, if you've got to sell that house of yours, that you are prepared to move, and that's okay with your family and your family situation. And most importantly, too, what is your comfort level for what you want your house to cost? So a lot of our clients and a lot of the people who would be building custom houses, may actually qualify for more money than they actually want to spend. So we see that from time to time. People might qualify for $1.5 million house, but they only want their house to be 1.1 or 1.2. So it's really important that you know where your limit is and then know where you actually want to be and where you want to land, because that's key information to communicate with your builder and planner. Where do you want to live? So we actually included a picture up here of an acreage. As you can see, a very beautiful location, looking over the South Saskatchewan River. So this is great if you want big spaces and you want lots of yard to maintain, but it may not be great for your family. So really what you want to decide is, how far do I have to drive each day to get to work? If you've got 3 kids in hockey, you and your wife might be making 6 trips a day into the city, and that could be very problematic if you go and move out to an acreage. So we've seen a few people who have made that jump to an acreage. Their kids start to get to that age of about 8 or 10 when they start playing competitive sports, and then all of a sudden that it becomes very cumbersome, and so they want to move back into the city. So it's important when you're thinking about where you want to live, it's not just where you need to live today, but it's where you want to live over the next 10 to 20 years, because that's usually the time frame that you're building custom homes over. The other key thing is not to spend too much on land. So land is usually about 20 to 25% of the house cost. So we've had some people who really want to buy an expensive lot. Sometimes someone will find a walkout lot and they say, this is the lot I want, and it's maybe $300,000 or $400,000. And so usually what I do just really quickly is multiply by 4 or 5, and I say, well, do you want to spend, between 1.4 to 1.6 million? Oh, well, no, I only have $1 million budget. Well, if you only have $1 million budget, you're not going to want to use up 35% of it on the piece of dirt, because that's going to rob your house, and you won't be able to do as many features in your house to actually make that make sense for a custom home. And then the other big thing too is how much space do you require? So the city lots are a standard size. Some people, that's plenty. Other people not. If they have a lot of toys and they want to store things, you might have to look for kind of semi-acreage or acreage type lots. And so that's really important to think about. Timelines. So what are the timelines for your family? How quickly do you actually need a house? This is a really key thing to ask in your home to understand, because good design and planning can take anywhere from 4 to 6 months, sometimes even up to 8 months. And then your construction could take upwards of a year. So if you end up with that kind of time frame and you need a house in 6 months, it's probably not best to be rushing that along. And the other key thing to remember too is you might be able to rush your designers and start construction sooner than when the design is done, but the problem is no one was going to be able to give you an accurate cost estimate if your design and planning isn't done. So you're probably going to end up overrunning your budget, and everyone's going to end up being a little bit sad about that, because that's no fun for anyone involved. So I would just say to really make sure you plan for that time on the front end of the project. The other key thing is, well, what type of house are we going to build here? Is it a large house? How many square feet is it? Is it going to be a bungalow, a bi-level, a 2-story? And also, what is the finishing scale going to be? It's really important, because when you get into custom home building, you can have anything you want, but everything that goes in will all add to the time and how long it takes to actually build, and it'll also add to the overall cost. So when you think about how much a house is going to cost, you need to understand what is actually in it. Another big one too is the architectural curb appeal. So when you pull up to the front of a house and you're like, wow, that's beautiful. Well, we have to make sure that your house, when you were designing it, actually has those same amount of layers, so that it looks and has that curb appeal, because you really want that wow when people pull up. And as you can see from, I just got a couple of pictures that I've pulled up here, just some different types of floor plans, and then also a different level of details too. And you can see here, especially this bottom corner on the left, large scale, black windows, floor to ceiling. That's a big curb appeal thing, but it's also a big cost item, and it costs more to finish those windows on the inside. So when you're talking to your builder, they're going to have to be taking those types of things into account. You'll also see mixed materials on the exterior, any wood grain materials, upgraded stucco, and upgraded trims and moldings. Also, we're going to add to that overall cost. So you can't just, you got to make sure you understand what you want to see in there. And then just in some of the other pictures here, you can see floor-to-ceiling cabinetry, especially on 10-foot ceilings. That's going to add a lot of cost, but boy, does it ever look a lot nicer to go right to the top. Plus, you don't have that dust sitting up on top of the cabinet. But those are some of the things that are customizations that do end up costing a little bit more money. This is another good example. It's a house we built back in 2018. And the top left-hand picture there, it may not be able to tell from here, but that's an 8-foot island fireplace. So you can actually fully walk around it. And supported above it, you'll notice there that it's glass because you can see right through. All of that quartz is hung from the ceiling. So we've got about 4,000 pounds suspended, and you don't see any beams, you don't see any posts, you don't see any structure. That kind of detail looks beautiful, but it also requires an extensive amount of planning, engineering, and also cost that needs to be factored in when you go to build a custom house. You'll see here too just the variety of different ceiling details and that sort of thing. Those aren't going to be standard in normal regular houses. So if you're going to be wanting those into your house, those have to be planned in and thought about right off of the bat. Home building too, one of the things that, we've been in the business for 10 plus years now, and home building is a very, very personal experience. And it is one of those large investments that you're going to make. It's probably a once-in-a-lifetime investment. But what we find is that some people don't spend enough time actually investigating, doing their research, interviewing their builders, and actually just understanding what they need in their home. And so the problem with that is that you end up not doing that due diligence, and you might hire the wrong group of people. So you want to spend that time. I was actually looking at some statistics the other day, and the average person right now is spending 90 minutes a day on TikTok. And I see one young guy right here. He might be guilty. We should ask him, how long do you spend on TikTok a day? Hour, yeah. Well, the stat was actually 90 minutes, so an hour and a half. So if you multiply that through by 30 days, it's roughly 40 hours. So if you can simply take from one time suck and put it into planning your house, you would be so much further ahead if you could take that 40 hours and put it into design and plan of your house and preparing to hire your team. So that's one thing that we always recommend, is just really taking that time to interview on the front and get the right team in place. How much does it cost? So this is one of the most famous questions. Usually, and this is the interesting thing, it's usually the first question that we get asked. And this question, as we know, cannot be answered without knowing what is in your house. So it's almost like I came up to you and I said, how much does it cost to go to Costco? And, well, your response would be, well, what are we buying, right? What are we putting in the cart? Is your 5-year-old there with you putting in things into the cart behind your back that you can't see? You don't know that, right? So we have to work out all those parameters. We have to actually find what's going into the cart and what are those features that you're actually paying for in the house. The other key thing about custom homes too, if you compare them, we're going to talk a little bit about production homes versus custom homes. So a production home is a house that you can walk up and you can buy. Possession dates are usually within a month or two. Sometimes out a little bit further. But in a production home, they've built it 100 times. So they've worked out all the kinks, they've optimized it, and made it easy. Or I shouldn't say easy, it's never easy, but they know exactly what to expect, so they know what's there. But in a custom home, it may have never been built before. In fact, every house we build is typically completely different than the other. So it's very hard to know how long each one of those details is going to take to assemble. So there's a time component there and also a cost. So one of the key things to take away is dollars per square foot is not a good indicator when it comes to custom homes, because it all does depend on what's included. So that's not a good parameter to use when you're trying to choose your builder. You want to choose your builder based on service, based on their capacity, based on the talent of the individuals that work there, and then try to understand what their cost is. But you got to make sure that you're comparing those apples to apples. Your relationship with your builder is longer than many other relationships. So it's very typical in a custom home to spend 2 to 3 years with your builder and design team. So you want to make sure that you choose them well. These people are almost part of your family, and you want to make sure that you're comfortable with them. So one of the things, a couple of the other key messages is add-ons can add up. So if you keep putting things into the cart, someone's going to go through the till with those and they're going to scan them, and those eventually end up getting found. So as you're working through design with your design and planning team, you want to make sure that someone's keeping track of all the things that you've put into the cart. And you also want to be making sure that you're touching base with your builder at the same time to make sure you haven't designed something that can't actually be built. The other thing I want to leave you with for this group of slides here is you will always get what you pay for if you take the time to ask. So a lot of times people will say, oh, that's expensive, or that's a ripoff. But the question is expensive compared to what? And a ripoff compared to what? And so you really have to think more deeply about those questions before you make those statements. Speaking about apples to apples, how about apples to bananas? So that's the kind of industry that we get in sometimes. So people are comparing two completely different things and then thinking that the price is the same. So as we're saying here, if you're deciding between an apple and a banana, it's great for a smoothie, but it is not what we should be doing in home building. We always want to be normalizing and trying to understand what are the apples to apples. So the way to do that, because most people out there who are building a custom home, they're going to be new to this industry. They're not going to necessarily know, well, what's involved in this. So you got to talk to people who are in the industry to get opinions from them. I like to start with real estate agents. They know the marketplace. They know the builders. They've been in most of those builders' houses. They're an absolutely fantastic resource for understanding who might be a good custom builder for your family. I also really appreciate the trades people. The first thing they do when they go into any show home or any house is they go down to the mechanical room and then they look for what the builder did down there. And then they know where the secrets are. And you can tell a lot about your builder based on what they did in that mechanical room, because it's still actually, it's not covered up. But whereas everything in the rest of the house is. So talk to the tradesmen, see what they say about what builders they would build with if it was their house. Mortgage brokers are great. We work with them all the time, so they know how easy the builders are to work with, how they finish, whether they meet their timelines, whether there's a lot of change orders. So that's going to be really helpful. Lawyers, they're going to be able to also give you an opinion on that. And then other clients, as far as referrals go. You know, the greatest thing is if someone's actually lived in another builder's house for a couple years, ask them, how was the service? You know, how was the build process? How was the planning process? And they're going to tell you, and it'll be based on firsthand information. So some of the questions you want to ask are, and this is sorry about this slide, you guys. It is very detailed. I just want to mention too, our slides will be available. We're going to be posting them on our website and on social media. So any of you who want to go back and actually look through these, we will have them available. So I'll run through this list here, but if you feel it's too much, we can always get them to you later. So what you want to know from your builder is what they offer for in-house design. So there's a spectrum. So some builders will have no design services and no planning services, all the way to having full integrated design services within their own house as a true design build firm. And so you want to know the builders you're interviewing, well, what can you offer me? You want to know if they're going to help you with selections, or maybe you have to go shopping on your own. Anyone who's ever completed a custom house realizes there's probably about 20 different stores you have to visit and hundreds of decisions. So what you want to make sure is, do I have help with this or do I need help with this? You should ask if they're going to draw your plans for you. So that's another key thing. Some people have in-house services where they can draw the plans, and they can also draw all of the fireplace details and the cabinetry details and that sort of thing. You want to ask them if they have interior designers. It's really good to ask if people have credentials who are on their team. And you're going to also want to ask them what their quality control program looks like. This is one of those things, custom home building, it's really important that things go in the right spot, especially because of all of the things we're going to fit up and put on the walls, and really beautiful wall sconce details, fireplace details. Well, it does matter where things go. And even if you have the highest quality tradespeople, random chance, sometimes people put things in the wrong location. So you want to ask your builder, how do you check to make sure that you're getting what you asked for in the first place? Because what you don't want to do is go there on turnover day and notice that a pot light is off center, or notice that the wall sconce should have been pushed over by 6 inches. That can be a very, very sad thing for a homeowner to experience. You can also ask about their mission, vision, and values. So this is another really important thing. What they're prepared to write down on paper is probably what they're prepared to do for you. So make sure that their mission, vision, and values actually align with how you feel about the world, and make sure you get a good fit. You can also ask if they manage waste and recycling. Not every builder does, but this is a really important thing for just carbon footprint and for just improving of our environmental situation. And then the other thing too, ask them what happens when something goes wrong. So custom home building, and really regardless, any home building we do, there's always going to be things that do not go to plan. We live in a very chaotic environment where you've got hundreds and hundreds of people moving through these homes and building and helping and doing. Lots of different companies that are coming in there. So really what you have to do is have someone that you know you can work through conflict with. It's really important to know that you can resolve a problem if you have that with your builder. So really pick someone who you trust. And then ask them what they do to get the house ready for turnover. So if their answer to you is as well, we put a couple hundred people in the house 2 days before you get there, and then we hope for the best, you may want to ask a few more questions about that response. You're going to want to see something that starts 3 to 6 weeks prior to the turnover and involves cleaning and inspecting and quality control checklists to make sure that things aren't missed. The average checklist would probably be about 300 to 400 lines long, and really, really key because there's a lot of components in a house. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about that front end, about the design and planning. This is, we want to kind of understand what's included in this, how to get the right team in place, how you can get an integrated home. So if you're bringing together designers, builders, project managers, how are they going to actually seamlessly work together? And the other thing, how stressful is this going to be for you? I think if you hire the right team, the answer is it shouldn't be stressful at all. So you want to make sure that you find and talk to other people who have built with that builder before and find out, was it stressful or was it easy? And there's going to be a spectrum there. One of the common misconceptions that's out there is that a home can be built by just simply drawing a set of plans. Plans represent probably only about 15% of the information that is actually required to build the house. So you have to ask yourself, who's going to fill in the blanks if you want to just hand those plans to a builder and then get a house built? Who's going to complete the rest of the work? So in some cases, the builder just fills in the spec for you. So they will answer the other 80% of the questions, and you'll get what you get, and you can't get upset because you didn't ask and you didn't specify. However, you can also do a lot of that specification yourself, and you can do that 80% of the work. If you have the interest and the time, that could be, and the capacity, that could be not a bad idea. But for most people out there, you're going to actually want to hire professionals that understand the implications of doing this work. So we're going to talk a little bit more about those professionals. So one of the things is we look on Pinterest, we look on Houzz, we look in the magazines, and we see all these beautiful pictures, and it's really easy to come in and say, build me this. But in a lot of cases, you might be looking at a $10 million home. So if you're looking at a $10 million or $20 million home that's situated in Los Angeles, California, that has these beautiful, expansive doors that go from one side to the other, there's probably two problems with that. Number one, you probably can't afford the $20 million home. And number two, they have a completely different climate than us. And so it's really important to temper your expectations based on those pictures. And to understand that it's important to go through with your design team and actually ask, hey, is this even feasible? You know, I love the feeling, I love the vibe. So you want to ask yourself some questions about that. In this picture here, this is a house we built back in, I think it was 2021 we turned that over. And there was hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours involved in getting this picture to look like this. And dozens and dozens of subtrades, designers, and planners that had to all come together to produce a picture that looks like that. And it looks really easy right now because it's super clean, right? But the reason it's super clean is because someone thought about every one of the steps. And so it's just important to realize that there is layers behind that. One of the key things, you only have one chance to get it right. Once it's built, it costs you money to unbuild it and change it. So you want to make sure that your design team is actually producing drawings, looking at the locations of whether it's light sconces, storage. We've got a whole bunch of electrical plugs over there for some built-in speakers and record players. Fireplace, and then the other thing too is these beams up here. You got to make sure those beams go in the right location, and all of the lighting in the ceiling also goes in the right location. This is a picture of it stripped down. So what I'm trying to do is show you from beautiful picture to drawing back down to actually the wood, and you're gonna see up here we've got pot lights that have to be within a 1/4 inch. Maybe even an 1/8 of an inch so that they don't look out of center when you look at them in the beams. We've got wall sconces that are located here that if they're not centered, as you start to apply drywall in different layers, things grow. And when they grow, dimensions change. And so you have to be able to see the future of where that's going to be and then relocate things. We got fireplace gas rough-ins. Up top, you're going to see the hidden beams that were purposely raised. So that they weren't in the way of the picture. And all of that planning has to come into it. So the key to finding the right team is to hire people who actually have credentials and experience. Now you can hire whoever you want, but the odds are and the probability is if you hire people who actually build in the residential home industry and they have experience, you're going to get a better product. So you're going to want to look for interior designers who are certified, architects, planners with some type of degree in planning and facilitation to be able to facilitate and bring together these larger groups of people, architectural technologists, engineers, and also project management professionals. So all of these people, you may not need them for every one of them for your project, but what you're going to want to do is select the people that are required for your project. And talking to your designers, interviewing people, you're going to figure out what you need for your team. You want to make sure that people have experience in the relative areas of residential home construction. So that could be architecture, interior design, selections, furniture and fabric. You know, one thing that people forget the most is they'll build these beautiful custom houses and then they move in all their old furniture and they're like, this sucks. And so they realize they now have to spend $100,000 refurnishing their home. So the better thing to do is when you're planning your house is plan on changing that furniture out. And the way to do that is to talk to someone who actually knows how to do furniture design and planning, and then make sure it actually fits in your house and that your space actually can fit it in. Landscape design, lighting layout, power requirements, mechanical technology, and structural design. And then the last item on here, constructability and costing. So this is where you're going to want to have your builder as part of that integrated design team so that they're going to be able to give you cost estimates and they're going to be able to tell you about the constructability, whether what you're designing doesn't actually make sense, and bring it all together. So it's a real collaboration between that larger group of people. So when you interview your team, they should have written processes. So any good designers will have their documented milestones. So you want to make sure that you understand how long those milestones will take and also what's involved with you as you go through that process. Designers should know how to listen and interpret what you're saying. So if you sit in a room and you watch this over the years, what you'll see is there's so many things people don't actually verbalize, but they want. And someone who's been in the industry for 5, 10 years, they're going to be able to read between the lines and then paraphrase something and give it back to them to make sure that they've actually included it. So the next part is how does it all come together? So we've talked about this design process, we've talked about contractors and builders. How do we actually bring this team together so that they all work to meet your goals? So you don't need to actually read this one. This slide is very, very long, but integrated project delivery is really everything we've been talking about this whole time. It's all about how the owner, the designers, planners, and contractors come together to build the most cost-effective house to meet your desires. And what you don't want is to hire a whole bunch of individual people and then have a bunch of individual designs and outcomes. You want all those outcomes to come together. So on this pie chart here, we've just kind of laid out what that could look like. You can see here from our previous conversations, floor plans being one slice of the pie. Very important slice of the pie, but we want to make sure that we've actually stepped back and looked at the functional needs of the site, the functional needs of the house. A lot of people too want to, maybe they might be living there for 20 years, so they may start with babies and then end up with teenagers, and those teenagers might want to go down into the basement. So how do we create a house that does that? For people who are a little bit older, they may want to age in place. So they may want to have an elevator. They may want wheelchair accessibility. They may want wider doors and better handles that actually allow for that. And so that's a really important thing to start with. We've got our exterior detailing, our energy, how much our houses use for, we're going to talk a little bit more about that for energy use. Your contractor, structural, and then this is our favorite here, interior design. Like, everyone gets really excited about interior design because it's what you see. Yeah, when you open up the magazine and you turn to the page and you're just like, I want to live there. That's the interior design that's usually talking to you. So it's fundamental, but what we can't do though is we can't get so overwhelmed with the interior design that we forget about all of the other things that have to come together to support that interior design. Mechanical, electrical, technology, all those things, they're in the background. You don't see them, but you probably will feel them and you'll know if they're missing. But if they're there and they're done right, you'll never see them and you'll never know that they actually existed. So integrated project delivery is really just taking all these slices of the pie and bringing them together. And typically, that's where you're going to want your facilitator or project manager, someone who really understands each one of those elements, but can make a really cohesive whole. And if you get the right people doing that, that's where 1 + 1 won't equal 2. It's going to equal 5 because you're actually going to get a huge amount of synergy and get something better than any of the individuals themselves could have produced. So the next step, I just wanted to walk you guys through kind of there's 9 steps to getting through that design and planning to get to construction. So usually when most people call, the first thing they want to know is, when can I break ground? And that's a good question. Most of the time, I don't actually know the answer because we haven't started anything and we don't actually know what we're doing. And there's a whole bunch of other really important things that we got to do before we actually get there. So these next 9 steps here, I just wanted to step through with you guys just to kind of show you what those key things are. So when you show up, you're going to have an inspiration picture or maybe hundreds of pictures that you've tagged over the years because you've been waiting and saving to do this dream home. So those pictures have to be distilled, and we have to bring out what we want the feeling of the home to be. We have to look at the site influences, so we need to know where this house is going to be located, and also the orientation. Once we've understood where you're trying to go with the project, then we can talk about the functionality. And so the functionality is really key about how big's your family? How much space do you need? Do you like to have big Christmas parties with 50 people in your kitchen? Well, if you don't need a large kitchen to fit 50 people. But some people want that. So it's really important to kind of understand. Flexibility, how does the house age with you? Those are some of the key questions that we're going to be asking in those first stages. And then we can start drawing floor plans. So one of those things that usually happens in the industry is everyone wants to jump to the floor plans, because that's the exciting part where you can finally see what's going to go beside what. But you want to make sure that you've gone through these two steps before you get to that next stage. Once you have your floor plans done and you figured out what rooms go beside each other, you can start adding the layers. It's kind of like dressing the house, okay? So you're going to add in ceiling details, wall details, lighting, plumbing fixtures, countertops, cabinets. This is all the beautiful stuff that you see when you walk into someone's house. That's all happening in that box for interior design. Exterior architecture. So as the interior design is starting to come together, you can have another group starting to work on the curb appeal, the overall building envelope, what materials are going to be used, the landscape design. If you're going to put a pool in, it's really important that your doors in your house line up to where the pool is going to eventually be. So we want to kind of bring those landscape decisions back so that we can understand them right now. And then, of course, structural, mechanical, technology, electrical. We just don't want to see it. That's the whole thing. But we got to make sure that someone's planned it so that you don't see it and that it works really, really well. Once you have those 6 components all together, you're going to know what your house is. And now we know the what. So now we can apply the cost. So that can go out for tendering, and we can finally get that apples to apples quote that we've been looking for the whole entire time. And that's where you report back to the owner. And typically there could be a dozen different options that you could save money on, you could add money on. And so your builder is going to report back to you on those things in kind of an a la carte menu so that you can choose. Because really, it is up to you. Then the project management. This is my favorite part of it. It's how are we actually going to get this done? What's the schedule? What is the cost? How are we going to manage those costs? What's the line item budget? And how are we going to work with our owner to make sure that they get all the updates along the way and we have good communication flow and low to no change orders? That's what we're trying to achieve there. And then our construction team, this is also my favorite part too. How are we actually going to do the day-to-day details of building it? And another group of people will look at that, what the site prep is, what trades are actually going to be on site, quality control, and also reporting to the owner as well. So those 9 steps there, as you can see, there's a lot that goes into these houses. So it's really important that you have a team that can look at it. Switching gears a little bit, so one of the things, and this probably, now that I think about it, this slide should have been further back, but we'll still come back to it here. The size of a home dictates about 70% of the actual cost of the home. And another misconception that I run into all the time, that's just kind of interesting, is that most people will say, oh, we're really simple people. We don't need all the bells and whistles, and we don't need fancy taps. And in their mind, they just saved $200,000. But they didn't save $200,000 because they were building a 6,000 square foot house. So the big thing to kind of leave is that don't put space into the house that you're not going to use, because that space dictates about 70%. And you're not going to save it by cutting back on your taps. If you look at a budget, let's say of $1 million, just to use simple numbers, $700,000 of that $1 million has to do with how big you made the house. $300,000 has to do with the pretty stuff inside. Now you can't cut that stuff right out. I mean, you still need a tap and you still need countertops. So the most you're going to save maybe might be 15% of the 30%. So you might be looking at $40,000. So that's not going to be the $200,000 that you were looking for. So that's just another key message to kind of leave everyone with. We've talked a little bit about this, but this is a house actually we built over on Poplar Crescent in Saskatoon here, and you can see here just the architectural elements that were chosen to really help this house look like it's been there for a long period of time and fit in with the older streetscape in Nutana. So what we're trying to do with all of our architectural detailing, eliminate the visual clutter, make it fit into the surroundings, and have enough textures and materials that it has the curb appeal and remains visually interesting. On the structural side of things, the location of posts and beams, I get really excited when I see this picture. My background is mechanical engineering, so I love the ductwork and all the plumbing parts of the house. But you can see here, by choosing a certain type of truss called open web wood joists, we're able to get all that mechanical up inside. And so you're not going to run into these bulkheads. So really key for planning. And then just some more pictures of duct shafts. You can see with this one here, if you didn't plan mechanical right at the start, when you were making the floor plans, you wouldn't actually have the space to put that ductwork into. And you'd end up with a bulkhead somewhere that you're not going to like. So you want to make sure your builder's actually thinking about those types of things. Sorry. We'll back a slide. So energy. So I don't know if anyone's aware of some of the big energy code changes that are coming down the pipe over the next little bit. But by 2025, and actually we're going to be there's going to be a step code there that over the next several years is going to take us to net zero. And that's where your house actually uses less energy than you're producing through solar panels or some type of energy generation equipment. And so you want to make sure that your builder understands this and that they can target the right level of energy usage for you. Interior design, and this is a good example of just a beautiful picture. Lots of just nice elements that really create that feeling, overall feeling in the house. And that's done with, cabinetry, different materials and product selections, the addition of like textures through the wallpaper. And so really key for getting that feeling inside a house. And then not to glaze over these, but we've already talked a lot about this, but this is the mechanical, electrical, and technology. And these are all the things that as a homeowner you might be thinking about or wanting to ask your builder about. The one thing that I just maybe to draw a little bit of attention to is the electric vehicles. That's going to be a big change coming up over the next 5 years. And you're going to want to make sure your new custom house actually has the plugins for them. And that maybe it has ability to put solar panels on the roof so that you don't have to pay so much for your power usage. So those are some things. On the mechanical side, you might be putting in a future elevator if you want to do the age in place. So that's something to also think about. And then as far as technology goes, whether it's alarm systems or cameras, or just really good sound throughout the house, you're going to want to be thinking and planning these things right off from the start. So actually, when you go to finally hire, now that you've asked all these great questions of your design team, how do you actually hire them? Well, they're going to say, well, do we need a contract? And your response is going to be yes. And the reason is because you want to get everything in writing. You want to have it written down what the milestones are, what the expectations are, what they're going to actually produce for you at the end, and then also a good understanding of how it's going to flange and connect in to your builder team. And so if you're hiring a team, some people kind of want to know, well, how much is that actually going to cost? So it really depends. How how many people are you hiring? How much is your builder supplying in-house? So these are some of the things you're going to want to understand. But typically, anywhere between 5 to 8% is going to cover you for a custom design process. If you want even more hands-on from your designers, and they're going to come to the field and actually check to make sure that everything's put in the right places, you might spend another 1 or 2%. So it's really important to plan for this cost. There are some specialized or niche firms that are going to be able to work hourly for you. So forgetting about the percentage, so that can sometimes be beneficial. And your builder might have a certain amount of in-house capability where you don't need to even go outside. So it's always good to kind of understand what that is. And key message there with design, as with everything in life, is that you will always get what you pay for if you just take the time to ask and understand what it is they're actually providing. As far as hiring your contractor, there's actually some fantastic resources on the Saskatoon Home Builders website and the Canadian Home Builders Association websites. One of the ones I'd reference there is the Get It in Writing module. It's going to talk about how to actually contract with your builder, important questions to ask. You're going to want to see if your builder's net zero certified. That could be important to you. So you want to see how they're able to work within that framework. You're going to want to hire your builder who's a certified professional home builder. And that's an important designation because it shows that they've gone through a minimum standard of training and they're in good standing with the organization. You want someone who has a proven track record. You want to make sure that they have insurance and WCB. It's pretty obvious, but sometimes you forget to ask that question and then you find out you're not fully covered the way you want it to be. Look for core certified builders. So that's basically safety designation. If they've gone through the process of becoming core certified, most likely they've also gone through the processes of building a really good quality business because safety is usually one of the things that gets left to last. So ask your builder what their position is on safety. And then make sure they're in good standing with the new home warranty. Just to talk a little bit about the types of builders. This can get really confusing because a lot of people will use the word custom, but there's all different types of custom builders. So what you're going to want to understand is which is the best custom builder for you. If we look at production builders, just before we move on to custom here, those houses are pre-built to a standard specification. They're typically already built or in the process of being built, and possession date times are usually immediate to a few months out. So, custom. Okay, so we've actually broken it into 3 levels. There might be 4, there might be 2, but we've kind of thought that the 3 kind of really does it. So in level 1, this is where you're going to be picking between a variety of floor plans. So there'll be pre-established floor plans and maybe 2 or 3 different color palettes. This is essentially a pre-selected design that you get to have a little bit of input in. And that, in a lot of people's minds, is custom. But that is probably not what a lot of people would think custom would be because they actually want to choose everything. So make sure you pick a builder that, if you want that level 1, make sure you pick a builder that specializes in level 1. You're going to get the best price. But if you want something that's in level 2 or level 3, please don't pick level 1 because you're going to be dissatisfied the whole time. And that's usually where a lot of the conflict comes in, is because a level 1 builder isn't going to have the processes to customize and change the whole specification. Level 2, you want a home that's unique to you, but you're okay with the builder picking the infrastructure and building shell and making a lot of those key decisions and recommended allowances for you. So in that case there too, you're going to pick a lot of the finishes. You're going to drive around to the stores. Could be 20 different stores, hauling samples to and from. So you want to ask yourself how much time you have to dedicate to that and whether or not you need a little bit help with design and bringing in a little bit more design horsepower for that. And then at the end here, level 3, so this is where you're going to be bringing together the full design team, and they are going to be integrating the whole project for you and essentially producing a curated design. So a curated design, we use the word curated because it's just like going to a museum. The museum doesn't haul out all the stuff they've collected over the last 100 years. They bring out the stuff that is important and that tells a story. And so in home building, the way we would use the word curated is that the home builder and the designers have looked at your pictures and they know you and they know what you want and what excites you, and they have picked something for you around that. So here's the summary slide, because we are almost out of time. So first one, key message, do not pick your builder on price alone. And I think we've gone through enough of that, but essentially you want to make sure you're comparing apples to apples. You want to understand what their quality control program looks like and that they actually can get you what you paid for and that they can produce what you've actually designed. You want to look at their mission, vision, and values and make sure that you agree with them. And if you don't agree with them, ask some good questions. You want to talk to them about what happens when things go wrong. So once again, there's going to be things that are unexpected, that don't go according to plan. You want to know that you have someone you trust. I like to use the analogy of a marriage. People who've been married for a long time know how to work conflict out. They trust each other. There's a whole basis there. The relationship with your builder and your design team is just as long. So you want to make sure that you can actually trust them and that you have a good process to resolve things. Ask them how they prepare for turnover and what they do if you do find deficiencies, what their process is for resolving them. You want to know how they manage their warranty work. So how long does it actually take them to finish? So are they able to clean up most of the issues in a month, 2 months, 2 years? So that's where you're going to want to ask around and make sure. And get it in writing. So things can go wrong if you skip paperwork and if you don't spend the time. So this all goes back to the TikTok analogy and taking some of that social media time and actually putting it into your project. And the other key thing, talk to people who know. Talk to people who are in the industry, real estate agents, lawyers, mortgage brokers, and find out who has the best reputation. So thank you very much, you guys. I really appreciate you all taking time to actually listen. Does anyone have any questions? You can ask now, or I will actually be available here in about 5 minutes after we go off stage, and we can also talk some details. So,
if anybody has any questions right now, just raise your hand and I'll bring the hot mic to you.
Oh, I like that. Oh, good.
Just curious, when you were talking about really focusing on the design and putting in what you want, do you find when people are looking at aging in place, like the example you gave, is there anything that your advice to give to people who want to stay in their home for as long as possible when building or designing?
Yeah, absolutely. There's we've designed a few homes just like that, and we actually designed for a couple who was in their 70s, and they want to actually never leave the home. And so one of the things we did is, of course, we built them a bungalow, but we made the bungalow zero clearance, and there's quite a bit involved in that, but their garage, they can come in a wheelchair straight out of the garage and wheel right into the house. And from the front of the house, they can also wheel directly in. And no obstructions, no barriers, probably be even better than what you would see in a commercial design for just being compliant. We put in an elevator. We put in 36-inch doors, so an extra wide door. Standard doors are about 32. 32 inches is great until you want to try and put a wheelchair through, and then it's not so good anymore. So going to that right away is a very good idea. Using levers instead of knobs. Putting backing in for bathing, for different types of assists and lifts. We can also do that. And there is a variety of other things that just as you kind of talk through them, you can even bring in a care home specialist, and they can actually help you with that design. So if that's something that you're actually thinking about long term, they're great features to build into a house, especially if you're going to make that big investment. you don't really want to move. So, and what a better place to retire and actually be taken care of is in your own home. So thank you very much for that. Anyone else have any questions? Anyone actually working on a house right now or planning on doing a house? Okay. Anyone who works in the construction industry out there? Okay, there we go. All right. Well, I'm talking to the people. Okay, well, does anyone else have any other questions? Okay. Awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. My name's Andrew Wagner. I'm with Maison Design+Build, and you can check us out on our website and on Instagram. We've got a lot of different projects there that we featured. So have a good day. Enjoy the show.